Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our evening session. I was invited next month to give a couple of talks. And one of them was asked that I give a talk on wrong mindfulness. And there actually is a term, right? There's right mindfulness and there's wrong mindfulness. Something in me wants to say that, well, mindfulness, as we know from the Abhidhamma, mindfulness is always wholesome. In the sutta, the Buddha said, Satincha kwahang bhikkhave sabbatikang vadami. Mindfulness, I tell you monks, is always useful. It's always good. But then he talks about something called miccha sati in the context of the Eightfold Path. But I think it's a little misleading for us to say wrong mindfulness. I mean, technically, mindfulness is always right. It's always good. But from a conceptual perspective, when we talk about mindfulness practice, we talk about being attentive, and the English word mindfulness, which is a rather general and broad term. It is possible to understand it as good and bad, good or bad. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about ways that the practice can go wrong. Not specifically talking about the state of mind that is wrong, but when you're practicing meditation, right, what can go wrong? This is quite interesting, and I think this was really what they're trying to get at with this invitation. They want me to talk about how the practice can go wrong. When you're practicing meditation, what can go wrong? How do you know you're practicing well, right? Sometimes there's this doubt, am I doing it right? So the first way that the practice can go wrong, obviously, is you don't practice. Of course, that seems quite obvious and kind of irrelevant. When we're talking about practice, what does it mean to not practice? Well, most obviously it means those people who don't come. Those people who never thought of practicing meditation. Well, that's not going to get you anywhere. But then there are those people who have heard of meditation, those people who have been even taught meditation, but are not interested in it. It's also quite common. Sometimes you'll teach someone and it just goes in one ear and out the other, over their head. Not able to or not interested in understanding it. But more importantly, so for all of that, for all of us, congratulations, you've passed that one. But what you might find instead is that sometimes, even though you intend to practice, you're actually not practicing. So, walking and sitting unmindfully. We do a lot of walking and a lot of sitting, and I'm sure sometimes you'll notice that you weren't being mindful, even though your intention was to be mindful. And you were trying your best to be mindful. And you find yourself getting distracted or slipping back into old habits. So unmindfulness is, of course, the first way that the practice can go wrong. And what's the result of that? The result of that is generally just a lot of stress and suffering. Of course, if you don't ever practice mindfulness at all, Your life is going to be full of stress and suffering, as most people's are. I mean, potentially, of course, it is possible that things will be good for a while, but it's quite uncertain because you're very easily sidetracked and get caught up in unwholesomeness. As a meditator, meditating unmindfully, this is where it becomes stressful. Your movements are unmindful, and so walking back and forth, and sitting like anything else can cause a lot of pain and aches and so on because of the tension in your body, the stress in the mind. Make you tired, make you unhappy, bored. Easy to get bored if you're not being mindful, right? The next way the practice can go wrong is if you're being mindful of the wrong thing. And this, of course, comes in many ways, in many forms. So you could be mindful of the past or the future. If you get lost thinking about the past, sometimes in meditation it is possible that or it does happen, that you get caught up in the past or the future, thinking about things that happened, or planning about things that you're going to do, right? It's quite common for meditators to get lost in planning or reminiscing. And that is considered a sort of a mindfulness. In the Pali, the word mindfulness is actually imprecise, but it's sati in the sense that your mind is focused on something, that you're recollecting something, that your mind is focused on something. It's just focused on something that's not really useful. The past and the future are problematic because of the effort it takes to be aware of them, but more importantly because they're not real. Right? The past isn't here, doesn't actually exist except in your mind, and so the result of living in concepts, in memories, or planning about the future, the result of living in these make-believe realms is stress and delusion, because it's very easy to get lost. For example, the past, you get caught up in emotions about the past, or the future, you get caught up in planning and get lost in potentialities that may never come to pass. So there's a lot of illusion. It's not real. More common, though, or equally common anyway, in meditation, is focused on something not past or future, but still focused on an object that is not present. This means a concept. So meditators will often talk about how they're daydreaming. Right? That's a simple example of how they start to imagine themselves here or there or in some situation. But there are actually meditations that involve the focusing on a concept. And so this is a common misunderstanding, or not misunderstanding, it's a common common practice that is distinct from actually seeing things as they are, being present. If you focus on people, for example, wishing, may all beings be happy, may I be happy, may this person be happy, or so on. If you focus on the parts of the body, if you focus on a candle flame, I actually had when I was teaching recently at my high school, one of the teachers there, he actually said that he just likes to look at a candle flame. And that helps calm him down and give him focus. So a concept is a common object of meditation. We have an idea or an image or a thing in our mind that we conceive of, and we take that as our object of meditation, which is actually fine. I mean, it's a valid meditation practice in itself. There's nothing bad about it. It's quite good. But the thing about concepts is that they are distinct from reality. They're pleasant, they're satisfying, they're controllable, they're predictable. When you live in a world of concepts, you can make them any way you wish. And in meditation, this happens. You get into states that are quite calm, and you're able to manipulate your awareness. So make large, expansive awareness, infinite consciousness, and that kind of thing. Or in a more mundane sense, you're able to imagine anything. Imagination is great. It's imagination by its nature is preferable to reality in every way. Imagination can be whatever you want. This is why books and television are so popular, because it's a means of manipulating reality, controlling our awareness. So imagination is better than reality in every way but one. And that one important distinction is that it's not real. You can't live in imagination. Imagination can't be a refuge. It's like virtual reality. Virtual reality might be great, but in the end you have to turn it off and go eat, or you have to turn it off and you depend on reality, is the point. And reality has some important differences. It's distinct in important ways, distinct from imagination. It's not like that. So that's important to be clear about, to be aware of, that we're trying to be conscious of reality. And so why we have you focus on your feet moving, your stomach, why we're not doing meditation on a concept or something, why we're doing actually very mundane exercises, because we want to learn about reality. It's much more interesting to us than anything else. The mundane, or what we call the mundane, is the real, and we want to learn about the real. So next way that meditation can go wrong, or mindfulness can go wrong. First, the problems, or the effect of focusing on concepts. See, the most dangerous thing about concepts is that they're infinite. And this really is a danger. This one is where meditation goes wrong. Because if you don't have a teacher practicing meditation based on a concept, or just imagining, sitting and letting your imagination go, it can lead to psychotic episodes, or whatever you call them, states of temporary insanity. If you see something and it's an image of something, and you just go with it and you see where it leads, and I've had meditators do this, and without proper advice, the meditator will manipulate and expand and get caught up in some feedback loop somewhere, and then fear seeps in, or anxieties, or anger, or addiction, and it feeds and it feeds, and it becomes dangerous to the mind. I mean, it's not incredibly dangerous. There are people who kill themselves because they get to such a wound up state, but I think that's rather rare. Mostly it just drives you crazy for a while, and then you stop meditating and get really afraid of meditation. So the realm of concepts, it does that because it's infinite. You can go anywhere. You can easily get caught up in who knows what, any number of, or an unlimited number of dangerous feedback loops. Now, that you don't have that problem with reality. Reality is not going to get you caught up in anything. Reality is just going to, at worst, it's going to be stressful. It's going to be uncomfortable. But at best, it's going to help you become invincible. At best, it's going to teach you. It's going to teach you to see things clearly. It's going to teach you enough so that you no longer react to experience, because all of our imagination, all of the concepts, people, places, and things that we live with, they're all based on experience, on reality. They all have reality as their root. You can't have concepts without reality. Once you understand reality, then the concepts that you live with, that you work with, become innocent, become innocuous. But there's still problems. So the big problems that come up in meditation is attachment. And so the first attachment that a meditator comes to is the negative attachment. You start to practice properly, and it's not very pleasant. You see impermanence, and you think something's wrong. I must be doing something wrong because this sucks. Meditation is not pleasant. It's not comfortable. This isn't this isn't the peaceful, blissful thing that you see on you read about in books or see in movies, people meditating, smiling, right? You're sitting here crying and moaning and stressing and freaking out in your room, and you're thinking, must be doing something wrong. Aversion is the first one. The stress that comes from looking at the things that we normally try to avoid. It's a great stress involved with that. We see impermanence, everything's changing, we see suffering, we see non-self. We find that we're not able to control our own minds. We find that we're not really in charge, that our minds are not responding, and that it's out of our control. The second way that meditation goes wrong, because eventually you start to accept. You start to see that there's nothing wrong with impermanence. It's just the way things are. All it means is, the real problem is the clinging. Reality has no problem with us. We have a problem with reality. And so as you become more familiar with it, you become more comfortable with it, in the sense of it not bothering you. And so the problem which some of you here are most likely to encounter is the problem of good experiences. As you get more comfortable with the practice and more proficient and stronger in mind, there will come a point where all of this early stress and suffering, and I think you're all getting there as it's becoming more comfortable, or you're getting more stronger, is the positive. You get stuck on the positive. So the texts talk about the problem of good experiences. If you're practicing correctly, you should have some good experiences. It should start to get smooth. It should feel comfortable, Not always, and eventually you let go of this, but in the early stages it can be quite comfortable. The problem is not feeling comfortable, the problem is that we cling to it. And you begin to favor it, and you start to learn about what it is that makes you comfortable. Maybe you see lights or colors or pictures and you follow them. You get entranced by them, and so you don't want to let them go, and you do what you can to cultivate them. Or maybe you feel calm, or maybe you feel happy, and you just don't want to move. You don't want to disturb the happiness or the calm, and you get attached to it. These come because we're seeing clearly, and we're no longer stressing, and so our minds become quite focused. After 4 or 5 days of being here, you should all go through these. Some of them. Maybe you start to know things and understand things about yourself. Maybe you start to have exceptional experiences of clarity, of knowledge. Magical sense. You start to read, be able to see things far away or hear things. Some people have clairaudience, clairvoyance. Some people remember their past lives, these kind of things. Magical powers, they say, can come, which are kind of neat. And if they don't come, it's even worse, because you might be waiting for them to come or looking for some kind of extraordinary experience. But more common is the meditator will start to understand the problems in their lives. They understand themselves better. And so they go with that. They start to work out their problems and get lost in worldly knowledge, which is good. Meditation does help you solve everyday problems. It's just that when you're doing that, you're no longer being mindful. And so while it's practically speaking good, from the point of view of meditation practice, it's not good. I get caught up in it. You can get great confidence and get caught up in that. You can have great effort and get caught up in that. Sometimes meditators have great effort, quite exerting themselves quite well, but they get caught up in that and they stop being mindful. Even mindfulness itself can cause you to stop being mindful as you start to get a hang of it, right? You start to find that you're able to note everything. Then you get attached to that and you stop meditating. And that can happen again and again until it starts to lose the novelty, and you're just mindful. Habitually mindful. So these two, clinging to the bad and clinging to the good. Now, both bad and good are valid objects of insight meditation, but here's the point. If you cling to the bad, you're quite likely to stop meditating. This is what leads meditators to run away when they can't handle the bad, things they don't like, the stressful. Those who get caught up in the good probably won't stop, and in fact might become quite confident and quite attached to the meditation, but they don't get anywhere. This is called Sukha Patipata Danta Binya, a person who has pleasant practice, but because they're clinging to the pleasantness of it, and their faculties are not sharp, they progress slowly. So the most important lesson for us is, first of all, not to shun bad or good experiences. But most importantly, to be very careful that we're learning to be objective, that we're learning to be rooted and grounded, centered in reality as opposed to centered in that which we like and that which we don't like. Trying to be mindful, If you come to understand what it means to be mindful, then you've found a way to be invincible. And the great thing about mindful meditation is that if you understand it, and it's not hard to understand, and you practice it correctly, and theoretically it's not hard to practice either. It's just challenging because the mind is so keen not to be mindful. But if you do it correctly, there's nothing that can stand in your way. There's nothing that can cause you suffering. When you stop reacting, when you start just seeing, when you learn how to just see, how to just be. So there you go, some thoughts on how the practice can go wrong. That's the Dhamma for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Go back to your practice. So again, I have answered questions elsewhere, but we're experimenting with just answering questions on the site because it kind of is a happy medium between not answering any questions and just answering every question. Because it's static, people can post questions throughout the day, throughout the week, and eventually get answers. If it ever loads, it's not loading for me right now. Well, the site isn't loading. I think I'm going to take that as an excuse not to answer any questions tonight. And hopefully it'll be working again, and we'll answer questions another night. Thank you all for coming out. I wish you all a good night, good practice, and that you find peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Thank you.